Most men, when they decide to disappear, do so on impulse. Hurt pride, undigested anger, or the old desperate attempt to show value through absence. And here is the brutal mistake. Disappearing without a strategy is just a sophisticated way of asking to be forgotten. You've seen it happen before. A guy disappears from a group, a relationship, a situation. He doesn't respond anymore. He deletes his digital presence. He cuts off contact. He thinks he's being enigmatic. He thinks he'll make you miss him, spark interest, turn the tables. But when he comes back, he realizes that nothing has changed. Or worse, he has changed, but in favor of the other person. The space he left was filled with silence, and soon after, by another presence that's more constant, more solid, more strategic. The reality is harsh. Disappearing on impulse is like leaving the stage before the applause. You don't make an impact. You just disappear. And when you come back, no one misses you. Because in the real world, presence is power. But absence only has value when it's felt as a lack of something essential. That's why today you're going to learn something different. An ancient code. Silent and extremely effective. Machiavelli's code for disappearing with force and returning with power. Because Machiavelli did not disappear because of drama. He withdrew to plan. His silence was construction. His withdrawal was part of a plan. Before we get into the strategies, you need to understand one thing. The modern world has sold men an emotional lie. That disappearing is an act of resistance, a way of showing that you have value. But the value isn't in disappearing. It's in the reason, the timing, and what you become while you're gone. Imagine a warrior who runs away from the battlefield to hide. He is seen as a coward. Now imagine a general who retreats with his troops to reposition, study the terrain, and counterattack with precision. He is not a runaway. He is a strategist. Both retreat. But only one of them returns as a threat. To disappear for ego is to hide. To disappear for strategy is to prepare. You've felt it. That moment when you realize you're being underestimated, that your presence is being ignored, your speech minimized, your energy misinterpreted. And the temptation is to disappear. Cut everything off, slam the door. But that's the emotional, reactive, and predictable way out. And anything predictable is controllable. The true Machiavellian disappearance has no audience. It happens in absolute silence, not to provoke longing but to build respect. Because respect is not born from drama, it is born from the absence that transforms, from the absence that is perceived as a sign of silent evolution. Disappearing with force is leaving behind not only the place where you were, but the version of you that you were. It's leaving so that when you return, no one can fit you into the same mold again. It's using your time away as a laboratory of power. It's leaving without explanation, but with purpose. Not as an escape, but as an affirmation. And here's the key. You don't have to shout that you're leaving. You don't have to justify your absence. The strategic man doesn't give notice. He just withdraws, silently, like a master of the game who already knows what the next move will be, and waits for the right moment to return. Machiavelli said, "Absence diminishes small passions and increases great ones, just as the wind extinguishes the candle and fans the fire. But this only happens when the man who leaves is prepared to return with something more: clarity, presence, dominance. Most people don't understand this. They disappear, waiting for the other person to come after them. But those who need to be chased have already lost the game. The man who walks with truth, who disappears to refine himself, who is silent to evolve, is not running away. He is gaining momentum. And the modern mistake is to trade presence as if it were an emotional commodity. If I disappear, she'll miss me. If I stop talking, they'll realize my worth. This is validation disguised as power, and real power doesn't depend on validation. It's built in the invisible. So stay with me until the end, because what you are going to learn today is more than a reconquest technique. It is a mental code, a silent manual, a ritual of masculine rebirth. Today, you will discover how to disappear with intention and return with presence. How to leave the scene as a mystery and return as a new authority. Because if you're going to disappear, let it be like an eclipse. let it be to darken everything. And when you reappear, let the world remember who you are, not as someone who was forgotten, but as someone who no one has ever dared to replace. Disappearing with force is not disappearing suddenly. It is not blocking everyone, nor posting indirect messages hoping that someone will follow suit. This is emotional theater. And a man who wants respect does not act. He plans, he executes, he disappears with a code. And this code has 4 elements that, when applied in sequence, make his absence a multiplied presence, and his silence a threat. The first element is to leave without fanfare, but with meaning. Most men leave the scene making noise, wanting to be noticed, begging for disguised attention. But the real impact comes from calculated silence. You don't need to let anyone know you're leaving. You shouldn't justify your departure. You leave when you're still on a roll, when your presence still matters, when you're still desired, not when you're tolerated. Because disappearing when you've already been thrown out isn't strategy, it's defeat. The strategic man disappears at the height of mystery. He becomes an unknown, and where there's doubt, there's power. No one respects the predictable, but everyone fears what they don't understand. The second element is working in the invisible. While the world thinks you are off, you are under construction. You are not missing. You are in a laboratory, training, reading, evolving, refining. Disappearance becomes fertile when it becomes the soil of rebirth. This is the moment when you distance yourself not to escape, but to expand. Because what you build in silence will one day scream without asking permission. Machiavelli understood this. He did not expose power while it was fragile. He let it grow hidden until it became undeniable. And when it appeared, it was too late to resist. Machiavellian absence is an incubator of domination, and the world will only see it when you decide you are ready. The third element is cutting off access, not strategic connection. Disappearing does not mean disappearing from everything. It is not about blocking or disappearing from people's lives like a needy teenager. It is about closing the door to emotional access. Those who were available to you now find silence. Those who could reach you with words now speak to emptiness. But this does not mean going off the map. It means controlling what is seen, what is known, and what is felt. You disappear where you were underestimated, but remain visible where your evolution has an impact. Selective absence is the new battlefield, and those who do not control their own access become hostages to the expectations of others. Finally, the fourth element: only return when you are the new rule. You don't return to ask for attention. You don't return to justify. You return when your absence has become noise, when your evolution is visible, when the contrast between who you were and who you have become is impossible to ignore. You don't return as a beggar. You return as someone who is above the previous narrative. You only step back when the old space no longer supports your new presence. And that is the true impact of Machiavellian disappearance. It does not seek validation. It imposes a new version of itself. And whoever wants to keep up must raise their own level. These 4 elements are not emotional steps. They are strategic foundations. And together they form the silent code of a man who understood that presence is not being there. It is regret. That absence is not running away. It is planning. And that return, when done with clarity and mastery, does not need words. It is, in itself, a reminder of what was lost, and of what will never be easily achieved again. Because the man who leaves with wisdom returns with authority. And where there is authority, there is respect. And where there is respect, there is command. Disappearing unprepared is like abandoning a castle in the middle of a battle, hoping that when you return, it will still be standing. It won't be. And worse, someone else will have taken the throne. An unprepared absence, one made on impulse out of anger or drama, is a silent suicide. Many men think they are taking a break so that the other person will realize what they have lost. But in reality, they are digging themselves into oblivion, because it's not time that defines the impact of absence. It's what you become in that time. You know this pain. Maybe you felt it firsthand. You disappeared thinking that this would prove your worth. You remained silent, waiting for someone to come after you. But what you received in return was coldness. indifference, or worse, replacement. Because absence that is not sustained by evolution becomes emptiness. And emptiness, no matter how uncomfortable it may be for a while, quickly adapts. Human beings are masters at replacing what is not essential. It's hard to face this, but it's necessary. Disappearing is no guarantee of being remembered, and returning the same way you were when you left is asking to be ignored. Most people don't understand this game. They disappear, hoping for pity. They disappear, hoping that the other person's pain will increase. But pain doesn't generate respect. Pain without purpose generates pity, and no man wants to be remembered with pity. That's why the Machiavellian Code is so lethal. He does not teach to disappear through vanity, but through vision. He does not preach silence as an escape, but as a forge. Strategic disappearance is a metamorphosis, the cocoon where the weak die and the strong are born, the place where need is silenced and presence is built. When a man strategically disappears, he's not just dropping off the radar, he's moving up a level. He understands that his former presence has been devalued, not because it was small, but because it was predictable. He was too available, too accessible, too transparent, and too much of anything is tiring. Therefore, strategic absence is not distancing, it is recalibration. Imagine the lion. He doesn't roar all the time. He's not always on display. The lion retreats. He watches. He chooses the moment to appear. And when he appears, there's no doubt who controls the territory. This is the archetype of disappearance with power. Walking away as if studying, not as if suffering, as if gathering energy, not as if begging for a reminder. Now compare this to common behavior. The guy who disappears emotionally but continues to follow everything, watching stories, liking old posts, sending indirect messages. He hasn't disappeared. He just wants to be noticed. And this need to be noticed is what destroys any shred of respect. Because respect is born from well-managed distance, from firm absence, from unbroken silence. Machiavellian absence is absence with intention. It is a presence that withdraws only to become inevitable. And that takes courage, because at first, silence hurts. You want to talk, you want to be seen, you want to explain. But it is in not doing, in enduring the emptiness, that you become stronger. Every powerful man has been through this, the desert where no one applauds you, no one validates you, but you keep going because you know what you're building. And when you come back, you don't come back the same. You come back denser, clearer, more selective. You no longer seek space, you impose space. You no longer ask for attention. Your simple presence demands it. And the most impressive thing, the world responds. Because the world feels when a man comes back bigger, when he comes back with a slow voice but a firm gaze, with measured words but sharp intentions. That's when the game changes, because those who ignored you start to ask themselves, what happened to him? Those who saw you as weak start to recalibrate their vision, not because you shouted, not because you explained yourself, but because you came back as someone who no longer needs to prove anything. And that is true respect, the kind that comes from silent transformation. The biggest mistake is not being rejected. It's being accepted for a distorted version of yourself. This sentence sums up the drama of many men who return from disappearance with the same behavior as before. They want to resume the relationship, the friendship, the social position, but they haven't evolved. And then they are accepted back into, but how? As supporting characters, as faded figures, as a shadow of what they once were. And this acceptance is more humiliating than being forgotten. That is why true return requires a radical choice. Either you come back as a new reference or you don't come back. Either you accept that you have risen and demand a new level of interaction, or you will continue to be treated as who you were, not who you are. And if that means losing people along the way, so be it. Because dignity is non-negotiable. You can't negotiate your own worth out of fear of loneliness. Because this loneliness, no matter how hard it is always better than living accepting crumbs of respect. The Machiavellian man knows this. He knows that some spaces need to be left so that he can expand, that some people need to leave his life, not out of anger, but out of coherence, because they no longer speak to the new level he has reached. This is the true transformation. It is not aesthetic, it is mental, it is emotional, it is spiritual. It is ceasing to be the man who disappears waiting for attention, to become the man who returns with a presence that silences any explanation. Because the silence that transforms is the same that teaches, and whoever learns from it will never be the same again. Disappearing with force is more than a strategy. It is a rite of passage, a symbolic break between who you were and who you decide to become. Because the man who understands the power of absence also understands the value of his own presence. He does not disappear to be noticed. He disappears to reconnect with his essence, far from the noise, the expectations, the need to please. In today's world, where everyone wants to be seen all the time, true power lies in disappearing with autonomy. Disappearing not as an escape, but as a silent affirmation. The man who does this declares, without saying a word, that you don't need everyone's approval, just the respect of those who really matter. You want to know what makes a man unforgettable? It's not persistence, it's not attachment, it's not constantly striving to be accepted. It's the ability to walk away when necessary, to leave without drama, to cut ties that weaken, to give up cheap applause in exchange for lasting respect. This man does not beg for space. He occupies space, but he occupies it with selective presence, with thoughtful speech, with silence that communicates more than 1,000 words, and above all with a posture that clearly says, if you are going to lose someone, let it be for being whole. Because the man who walks with his truth knows that not everyone will understand his journey. Not everyone will applaud your evolution. Some will say he has changed. Others will try to bring it back to the old version. And this is where the real test begins, the no back down test, of not shrinking to fit back in where it no longer makes sense. Many will try to negotiate with your new version. They will try to activate guilt, longing, memory. But you no longer owe them answers. You no longer owe them explanations, because your absence spoke. And when you came back, the new you presented itself. And this new you no longer fits into old dynamics, nor into fragile bonds. It is like a king who returns to his kingdom not to reclaim the throne, but to establish a new empire based on new laws. And those laws are simple: clarity, presence, a respect, nothing less, nothing below, nothing negotiable. Machiavelli knew this. He said that a wise ruler does not need the acceptance of everyone, but the loyalty of those who truly hold power. And in your emotional life, the same applies. You do not need to be loved by everyone. You need to be respected by yourself and by those who have a clear vision of who you are. When you disappear with intention and return with control, you change the vibration of the environment. People feel it. You enter and no longer need to say much. Your new energy commands, your new posture filters, and your new lucidity eliminates any possibility of regression. This is not coldness, it is lucidity. Because the man who disappears to find himself and returns with presence is not hardened, he is aligned. He does not reject connection. He just no longer bends to maintain connections that disrespect his essence. This is where many fail. They think that power lies in resisting everything, that disappearing means closing your heart. But that is not the case. Machiavellian disappearance is strategic self-love. It's a break to restore your inner empire, to remind yourself of your own worth before returning to the field. And when he returns, he no longer asks to be seen. He no longer begs to be accepted. He stands there as if he knows, I am, and whoever has eyes to see will see. Those who notice will approach with new respect. Those who don't will be left behind. And that's okay, because this man's path is no longer about acceptance, but about alignment. He no longer wants to fit into someone else's mold. He wants to shape the reality around him with his new presence. If you've made it this far, you now understand what it means to disappear with force. It's more than a tactic, it's an identity. It's the silent assertion of a man who no longer has time to explain himself because he's busy being. and being with such weight that the world has to adjust to his presence, not the other way around. So the final message is simple yet powerful. If you are going to lose someone, let it be for being whole. Because the man who walks in his truth is never alone. He is aligned with the destiny that respects who he truly is. And if this truth resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this message with those who need to stop disappearing out of pride and start disappearing out of evolution, with those who are ready to stop begging for space and start dominating presence. Together, let's free a generation of men who no longer want to be accepted with a mask, but respected with truth. Because the world doesn't need more shouting, it needs more silent presences that command. And it all begins in the right silence.